Armand Coleman was just 17 years old when he shot a fellow teen at a Roxbury club. He was tried as an adult, sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder. He ultimately served 28 years, openly repenting for his crime and focusing on healing and restorative justice, both for those convicted and for victims of crimes. Then in 2019, he was released following a Supreme Court ruling that declared it unconstitutional to sentence a minor to life in prison. Sean Ellis was 19 when he was arrested for the murder of police detective John Mulligan. His first two trials ended in hung juries. He was convicted in a third. Then years later, Boston police detectives who were integral to that conviction pled guilty to corruption charges, casting obvious doubt on their testimony. In 2015, Sean's murder conviction was overturned, and after more than 2 decades in prison, he was released. He went on to co-found the Exoneree Network and now serves as its director. Sean joins me along with Armand Coleman. He's now the executive director of the Transformational Prison Project. Armand, Sean, it's great to see you both.
Yes, I see you, Jim.
When did you guys first meet?
What year was that?
2013.
Okay.
Where was it?
At Norfolk, at MCI Norfolk.
In prison?
In prison.
At 2013. And you guys started working together pretty quickly on a bunch of things. Prisoners' rights, prison conditions, restorative justice. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is an amazing story, right? So I was 20 years into my incarceration as a youth. Spent the majority, all of my time in maximum security prison, and then I was transitioned to MCI Norfolk, where Sean was already like in a leadership position. So literally, like Sean was one of the handful of men that literally like held my hand and walked me and helped me transition into that institution.
And what did you guys do together? I mean, you started working on programs for fellow inmates, and as I said, restorative justice stuff. What exactly were you doing?
So I'll let Sean speak for us. But Sean was an elected official in the prison, and he had
elected official
within the prison, and he had an office space, and he allowed me to come to the office space, speak with the team, process stuff, and on a nightly basis.
And what were you working on? What were the kind of projects you and some others did together?
So some of the things that I did as an elected official at Norfolk was work on the conditions of prisoners' rights there, whether it was food, whether it was just the average conditions. But then we dealt with that. But then we also dealt with coming up with restorative justice sort of circles. Actually, Armand and I co-facilitated a restorative justice circle at Norfolk.
That's a Jericho Circle thing?
It's not necessarily Jericho Circle. That's kind of where I did some of my own work inside of Norfolk. But
can I say like restorative justice is an indigenous practice, right? This is a practice that's used to like but address harm and hurt that people have.
On both sides
of the equation. On both sides of the issue.
Correct. Do you put yourselves at risk when you're doing those kinds of things, when you're inside? You're both smiling. Yes.
Yeah, definitely on the inside, and from two different angles. One is, from the administration. So some of the work that Armand and I did on the inside, it was necessary. We kind of squashed gang beef on the inside, and kind of helped to mentor and monitor some of the younger prisoners from like into programming, so to speak. And so that was some of the things that we did.
But at risk. I mean, you can be disciplined for doing these kinds of constructive things by prison officials, right?
Absolutely.
You never told me about this elected official thing, meaning your fellow inmates elected you as a representative of them.
Yes.
My God. Okay, so then you get out. Let's talk about what you faced, because that's what a lot of the work that you guys are spending. What was hardest for you when you got out? 28 years, right?
The hardest thing for me when I got out is still the hardest thing today, which is building community. I was born and raised in New York, so when I came out, and I spent my whole life in prison, right? Think about it. I've been in prison my whole life. I never had a driver's license, never had an adult experience, adult relationship, none of that. And all the adults that I know are formerly incarcerated people that helped save my life, and I'm forbidden to interact with any of them. So that's been the hardest thing, building my own community of support and moving forward.
Well, stay on that just for a second. We haven't talked about that before. Another word for that, I guess, is loneliness, in essence. I mean, you built a family. The majority of your life had been spent with sort of family members behind bars. That were your relationships. And as you say, which I don't think we think enough about, is when you get out and try to build a support network, you're precluded from even associating with a lot of people who could provide you support. So how hard is that?
That's hard. That's hard. I want to just say I'm happy you just named it loneliness, I remember when I was interviewing for my release, I asked one of the guys who was interviewing me, who was formerly incarcerated, what's the biggest challenge you had? And he said to me, loneliness.
Really?
And I was like very judgmental in my mind. I was like, yo, you out, dude. What do you mean lonely? But literally, that's the primary thing that I face.
And Sean, we've talked about this before, but people haven't seen it. What were the major obstacles, the major things you had to deal with that you just weren't ready for when you got out?
I mean, it's certain realizations at different times, but just, you know, establishing and having just certain relationships, being able to process things emotionally, which I didn't have to do when I was in there. Work and trying to find work, trying to process, not process, but balance a checkbook.
You told me you didn't know how to turn on a laptop.
I didn't.
When you got someone had to show you how to turn on a computer. Forget how to use a computer.
Turn on the computer, turn on the phone. One of the first things that happened when I came home is my baby sister threw me a phone, and I looked at it, and the screen was black, and there was no buttons on it. I'm like, what do I do with this?
And the housing and employment and all the key things that allow people to live a decent kind of life. So as a result of all this, Transformational Prison Project, explain to people, I'm going to give you a website in a minute.
Yes.
Explain to people what you do there.
Yes, so the Transformational Prison Project actually began in the bowels of MCI Norfolk, like literally in the basement where he had his office, right?
With that elected official, is that how you meant?
Yeah. Exactly, like so we used their space to found our organization. It was founded by all formerly incarcerated people, all men serving loss of life crimes, and we delivered program services to men inside. And then we extended all the way to the women's prison, right? Because we had an external component. But today we deliver reentry service to formerly incarcerated people. We're in a unique position where we worked 10 years giving people programming inside, and now those same people are coming home. So we actually work to build community. Like the things, like I know what I suffered from and what I dealt with. So we actually use ourselves as models to deliver services that are needed.
You say you know what you suffered from. A story that included you in the Boston Globe earlier this year. I want to read a quote to you from you, and I want you to explain it to me a little bit if you can, Armand. You said, I thought I did it because I was an ill dude, or they said a bad dude. Me recognizing myself as a victim first allowed me to acknowledge the people that I victimized. What does that mean?
Oh, so what does that mean is that, like, and I got to credit my director of programs with this Noble. He always says hundreds of crimes were committed against me before I committed one crime. Like even my crime that I committed that landed me in prison, through the restorative justice process, I was able to find out what was the thing that led to the thing that led to me committing the crime.
And you're not saying you're not responsible for what you
Definitely
did.
not.
You're just saying people have to understand the trauma that so many men and women go through early in their lives
Exactly.
and what the impact that is.
Exactly.
So Exoneree Network, we talked about it a little bit, again, recently when you were here, Sean, but if people didn't see it, explain what you're doing there.
So what the Exoneree Network does is we provide practical, spiritual, and emotional support for exonerees coming home. Like what I found out and other exonerees found out is that when we came home to nothing. And there was nobody kind of there except for our loved ones to give us support. And so we came together and started talking and figuring out what are the things that we have to do in order to make sure our transition is pretty smooth.
Like what? I mean, like, do you help people if someone doesn't have housing? Do you help them that? If they just need to talk to somebody? Are those the kinds of things?
So to be specific, we help with housing support. We help with mental health support. We help with tech training for laptops and phones. And
does the average person give a damn what happens to men and women who've been in prison? I mean, do you find in the world at large that people care? I mean, do they? You know what I mean?
I think they care once they understand. Like,
what does that mean?
Meaning, if you sat in a space with the Transformational Prison Project, we would literally like speak to like what he's going through, what I'm going through, and you would be able to relate and associate. I actually did a program recently with guys who are veterans. He started literally talking about his transition from war to civilian life, right? And we were able to connect around that. So literally now they're our partners, right? They're our allies. They want to work with us because they see how we have more in common than we don't.
And when you say to mostly men, but some women who've committed some pretty horrible crimes, that what's important is this restorative justice thing, that we do have to reach out to the people you victimized. Is there a willingness to do that, or does it require a lot of pushing, a lot of persuading?
There is no willingness, right? But we had a tried and tested method. Like Sean told you, he was like one of the first people to do restorative justice in Norfolk. And the reason was we actually realized that we had to start with people who were considered the most incorrigible ones, right? Even though he was innocent, right?
Yeah.
The most incorrigible ones, like, so we started with lifers first. And when you start with them first, literally everybody comes behind and follows. But one thing
Sean's nodding in agreement, by the way, as you're talking.
Yes, but one thing we had to realize, and people still push back, but we had to first acknowledge that thing I just said to you earlier. What happened to them first? Once I acknowledge what happened to you first, show empathy what happened to you first, then you can own what you did and start to show empathy and accountability for what you did.
You know, it seems to me, you know, Armand says that ultimately people, when they learn, do care. I don't really care that much if they care because you're human beings or if they care because they want you to stay clean and live a decent life outside, which is good for them as well. So it seems to me this work is like unbelievably important. Last time you were here, you just received, what, a $250,000 grant from the state. How is funding with the Exoneree Network?
So funding is a work in progress. We're still growing. We're still seeking funding, and so that's the best way for me to explain it. Like, there's a lot of work to do, Jim. And what I mean when I say that is in terms of developing the programs that need to be developed that we know work, because we are the model, we are the experts in it. Because not only were we in prison, but we went through the process of I don't say programming ourselves, but developing the programs that then were implemented while inside of
And you can
prison.
show results.
And we can show results.
Where's your money coming from? I don't mean dictate your funding list for me, but what kind of money and from what sort? Individuals, foundations?
Individuals, foundation. We also got some state funding last year. But funding as director of the organization, the last year I had to learn that funding occupies 85% of my job title at the moment. So,
you know, and we're going to give websites in a minute if you want to learn more about the organizations, volunteer, contribute. You know, one of the things I'm amazed by, the more I get to know you, and I've known Armand a little bit, I am amazed by how there seems to be this relentless passion to give back, even from people from whom so much has been taken away. You're not exceptions to the rule. There are a lot of people like you.
Definitely. Even from the standpoint of guys who are still inside of prison, developing programming models, there's still guys in prison doing that. But the thing about Armand and I and others that are of like similar character is we understand that it first starts with us.
Understood.
And then once it starts with us, then we kind of grow it out and trying to affect the culture.
Before you go, there's a rumor that when you were in prison, you used to listen to the radio. Is that true?
What?
What kind of shows did you listen to? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time in max security. A lot of time is isolation, right? Over a decade. And I started actually listening to Marjorie and Jim Braude on 96.9 during the presidential debacle, right? And that got me through every day. I listen to y'all every single day, sometimes twice a day because they used to do rebroadcasts.
You're unbelievable.
And that's why I learned a lot of my stuff around politics.
Well, I've learned a lot from you, too, and from you, Sean. It's thrilling, and Marjorie will love to hear that, too. Gentlemen, Armand, good luck with your work. We'll give you information in a minute. Sean,
Can I give you something before I go?
Yeah, sure. Get it.
Yes.
What do you got?
So I have this Transformational Prison Project shirt that I'm going to give you. This is our motto: hurt people, heal people, heal people. Yes, and I'm pretty sure you can fit this one, Jim.
I hope it's XXXL.
I'm not going to go there. And I got one from Marjorie as well, small.
Great.
Right?
I think that'll fit her.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, it's good to see you. I really wish you good luck with your work, and I hope you stay in touch so we can continue to talk about it. Thank you so much. Here's the deal. You can find more information, I hope you will, online at newenglandinnocence.org and transformprison.org. Sean is also hosting a virtual event tomorrow called Voices of the Innocent. You can find out more about that at newenglandinnocence.org as well.